Okay, sorry about that, ladies. Okay, so this doctor had told me that if I would take 1 month shot of Lupron to try to help my symptoms to see if that would save me from having to go through a hysterectomy, that if it did not help me, he would do a hysterectomy. Trusting him, I let him give me the 1 month of Lupron. Well, again, just like the Depo-Provera, because they're in the same family of drugs, I became extremely ill. Any symptom, side effect, horrible, slight possibility thing that would happen to you on Lupron did happen to me. And I just kept telling myself I had to stick it out and that he would finally help me because I did what he asked. Well, when I went back in, it was 24 days after the Lupron. I had started bleeding about 4 days into the Lupron and had not stopped. I would go through roughly a pad and a tampon every 2 hours for that entire time. He said that that was pretty normal and I just needed to give it one more shot and 1 more month to be sure that that wasn't just my reaction to starting the medication. And I felt trapped and scared and alone. And I let him do it against everything in me telling me not to take the Lupron. Well, it only got worse after that. I was a mess, and the bleeding would not stop. And he scheduled a hysterectomy for me since I was still suffering. But when TRICARE, which is the military insurance, approved it, he was very upset at me because he said they would not pay him enough for doing it and he would not waste his time to do the surgery that he wasn't going to get paid for. So that was very discouraging. And I asked him for all of my paperwork so I could go find a doctor. He told me it would be $2 a page if I wanted my 10 years of records of seeing him every other week. So I didn't know what to do. So I was just very distraught. My husband was active duty. I had 3 kids to take care of, and I really just didn't know what to do. So I just started going to ERs. I went to probably 20 ERs here in the Metro Phoenix area, and they all had the same thing to say. Talk to your OBGYN. This is not an emergency. It didn't matter how much I was bleeding. It didn't matter how sick I was and how desperate I was. And so I started calling gynecologists. I just went down the row and called and called and called and called. Finally, I got in a place that would see me quickly. And when I went in, that doctor seemed to really care. And she brought up a word I had never heard before, which was adenomyosis. And she asked if anyone had ever suspected that I had it. And I told her no, I had never heard of it. And she explained that it's basically endo in the lining of your uterus, actually in the muscle of the uterus. So, which made sense to me. And she said it could not be diagnosed without removal of the uterus or a piece of the uterus being removed and checked by pathology. And I told her I just wanted a hysterectomy. I just wanted all of that out and I wanted my life back. And that I was scared that this was going to kill me, that I was going to bleed to death. And she finally agreed to do the hysterectomy. She finally agreed to do a surgery, another lap, It was number 10, and she knew it was number 10. But she said without the information from my other doctor, which he also refused to give her, so she had nothing to go on. But what I was saying to her is that she would commit to a lap to see what was happening, to see if she could help me, to see what was going on. And then she scheduled an appointment the next week. And I was even worse. And I had been calling and calling, and she wasn't available because she'd been doing surgeries or whatnot. So finally, they got me in the day before my normal appointment was scheduled, which was a Wednesday. And she sent me straight for an MRI to see if she could see what was happening in the uterus, to see if there were signs of adenomyosis, that she could suspect that that was there, or what else was happening. And the MRI came back clear, which I was not surprised by, because as many of you endo girls know, we do so many of these scans and tests, and then they want to tell us we're normal. So this made her a little hesitant to attend the surgery on a 28-year-old girl. 27. I was almost 28. And she just couldn't commit to a hysterectomy. You like the clock in the background? She couldn't commit to a hysterectomy, but she would commit to the surgery. And they prepped me for emergency surgery the next day. And I have never felt such relief in my life that she was going to help me. Or at least at that moment, I thought I was getting help. And that things were going to get better and it was going to be okay. So I went in Friday morning, and the MRI, they kept referencing it, that everything was normal, my ovaries looked normal, everything looked normal. And they took me back to surgery, and I was in surgery for almost 5 hours. They removed 75 endo lesions before she decided it was enough. She quit counting, and she removed the uterus, the fallopian tubes, the cervix, and parts of the ovaries. She also had to remove a brick-sized tumor that was off the right ovary that did not show up on the MRI. And my uterus was the size of a grapefruit, and it should be much smaller than that, smaller than an egg. So there were issues there, and I was bleeding to death. So they almost had to give me a blood transfusion, and she tried her best not to have to do that. And luckily, I didn't have to have that. But when I woke up, the relief that I felt was remarkable. She did an abdominal hysterectomy, and it was an incision from hip to hip. It was 11 inches. And for that to have felt better than what I was going through, I thought for sure it would change my life forever. And it did. I was very frustrated when I found out she did leave some ovaries. I understood where she was coming from, but I was scared. And she wanted to put me on Lupron, and that was not going to happen after my past experiences. So I said I just wanted to try on my own, no HRTs, see how it goes, go from there. For almost 9 months, it was the biggest blessing I'd ever had. I was top of the world, luckiest girl. I was camping, I was hiking, I was back to running because I was a runner, and it was me. I had me, and I was so happy. Well, I started to have a little bit of anxiety of using the phone, which seems weird, but it actually is pretty common post-hysterectomy or postmenopausal. So my doctor said, well, let's just try an estrogen patch and see if that'll help. After 3 or 4 days of having it on, I was in the hospital. I was a wreck, and I started having this horrific pain and my thoracic spine, and my chest felt like a bat, like someone used it as a batting ram, just completely battered and just horrible pain. And I started my rounds of ERs again. And it was so heartbreaking to have had 9 months of being a normal person and it disappears so fast. And so I went back and I told her 2 weeks after how horrible it was and that I didn't put the second patch on and that the pain was back to being unbearable. And then she suggested that I go see a psychiatrist because maybe I was just having a hard time letting go of the endo pain because I didn't know how to live without it. And it was a security blanket for me to have pain. Needless to say, I was extremely upset. So I went on a doctor search again and I found Dr. Hibner in Phoenix. And I got an appointment with Dr. Desai. And that was